Ladies and gentlemen, let's gaming Citicom video. Let us discuss DirectX 12 from the perspective of games developers and the Xbox One. Now, we still have more to go on this, including the likely future and what it means, but for now, let's discuss what I've just mentioned. So, oh, by the way, there is an accompanying article to this as well, and it does have some extra information that I won't really cover in this video, simply for the sake of brevity. So anyway, Microsoft definitely aren't the first to offer a low-level API solution. Of course, that would have been AMD with Mantle. And don't really be surprised if you hear OpenGL or Open Graphics Library also doing their own announcements in the not-too-distant future. It's most likely they will. There's already rumours that indeed they will be. So DirectX 12, however, will most likely have the largest impact when it comes to PC games development, despite the fact that it's not coming out 18 months from now, so that's about 2 years after Mantle itself. There's multiple reasons behind this, as one would expect. The primary one being that D3D12 will be cross-vendor compatible. So that means that if you've got an AMD graphics card, if you've got Nvidia, or you've got Intel, it doesn't make a difference. You're going to be able to benefit somewhat from this API. So Mantle, right now, is available for games like obviously Battlefield 4, FIFA and so forth, and it is offering a fantastic performance boost, particularly in lower CPU based performance areas, and it definitely is making a difference. However, the fact that it is only for AMD Radeon cards, even if you were to say that AMD hold 50% market share, and they don't, obviously market share goes up and down all the time, but even if you were to say that AMD does have 50% market share, it still makes it a bit uncomfortable for games developers to, go through the length of time to add this in. That's not to say they don't, of course, they sometimes do, but certainly not all developers are going to do that for just a select range of cards. And so, while it's arguable that they already are having support, for example, you've got Frostbite and Cryengine, which have announced already that, yeah, we're going to be supporting Mantle. Of course, we've already got titles which are using it. Windows and Direct3D, whether you like it or not, are the standard currently for PC gaming. So, Microsoft haven't implicitly stated, but it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be a higher level API path already built inside DirectX 12. This will allow coders, or developers shall I say, to code titles without needing to get down into the dirt and the mud of low-level coding. Now, that might sound like a bad thing to you. You might say, well, that's going to encourage less optimization in titles. Why would you want that? Well, here's the thing. Let's say you're developing Crysis or Battlefield 4, just to use the old chestnuts. The difference is you're being employed, or you are responsible for a team of massive workforce, and more to the point, you're developing a game which actually requires that level of optimization. For example, there's a reason that the joke goes, can it run Crysis? It might be a bit of a cliche, but it's also very true. Crysis 3, even on something like the GTX 780 Ti, can actually, at 1080p or 1440p, it really does start pushing the frame rates down, particularly if you start going with higher levels of anti-aliasing and blah blah blah. And while that's great for AAA games developers, and they certainly can and will most likely take advantage of that, we'll discuss in a moment, let's say you're not living on the bleeding edge. Let's say you're not doing that. Let's say you're developing games such as Limbo, or you're developing a game such as, let's say, Torchlight 2, which I've been playing quite a bit of recently, or let's say you're even developing a title like Trine or whatever. It's not to say that those games don't necessarily look good. They do for what they are, and some games are very successful, like you've got Amnesia, you've got Super Meat Boy, and they are extremely successful for what they are. However, they're also not pushing multi-core CPUs to the limit. They're not pushing draw calls to the breaking point. They're not needing that level of optimization, and also they're being developed by a smaller studio. Therefore, it's better to actually just make it easy for those studios to code and not have to worry about digging too deeply into the code itself. That's just kind of how that works. So DirectX 12 is really there to offer more of a choice for optimization. And indeed, this is actually ironically similar to the PlayStation 4, which is kind of ironic since obviously Microsoft and Sony, but there you have it. Now, with the PS4, you're actually offered two APIs. You've got GNM, that's Grand, and then Never, and then Mother. And on the PS4, that's like the very low level access to the GPU, basically coding to metal. So if you don't require that level of performance optimization, then there are multiple reasons as to why you wouldn't. For example, you're coding it, a game that simply doesn't require that, an indie game. You want to quickly mock something up at like a game, and you're just like trying to port the game initially to the PS4, for example, let's say from the PC to the PS4 or whatever, and you just want to test it out. Then you can use GNMX, so same thing but with Xavier at the end. That's an API, of course. Ironically enough, GNMX actually shares quite a lot of similarities from what I'm reading with Direct3D 11. So higher level coding on APIs aren't going to be going anywhere, at least for now. We're not going to be seeing the situation. And when you consider as well, by the way, the Cryengine, Unreal Engine, and other major engines themselves, generally speaking, are actually having a lot of crossover and a lot of use in the game industry, particularly now that both are available for a fee, a monthly fee, and obviously you pay some royalties as well if your game's successful. And it's pretty cheap as well. It's like, I don't remember which one's which, but one's like $19.99, the other's like $9.99. But regardless, they're pretty decent. And when you consider that, of course, they will have some of these optimizations most likely baked in, it actually makes it that much more appealing. That's not to say that it's 100% clear cut. As I've mentioned previously, one thing that is very puzzling is that Mantle is certainly still going to be pushing, and AMD have said, even to myself, hey, you know what, we're encouraging developers to push our technology. And here's the thing, as I mentioned in the previous video and article, there is still most likely got to be some level of abstraction there, because despite the fact that yes, we're going to like a more SIMD type of a single instruction multi-data approach for all three vendors as Intel, Nvidia, and AMD, they're not 100% the same. So in other words, they've still got subtle differences in their basic structure. They've got different amounts of stream processors, they've got different amount of ROPs, different amount of memory bandwidth, their drivers are different, blah 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 blah. In other words, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. And so because of that, most likely we're still going to be getting some level of abstraction, unless of course the developers want to go into the point of actually coding individual pathways per GPU, and I don't necessarily know if they'd want to do that, because then you've got situations in the future where, let's say that they were to code for like the 7800 range, just for example, the 780 range, or the GTX 780s, or Nvidia's current range. What happens in the future? So you've got all these different potentials right there, and obviously some of the stuff is speculation, but there you have it. So what about the Xbox One? Because that's the thing. I mean, some people are coming on the side of it's just marketing from the perspective of Microsoft, marketing. Others are saying, no, it's definitely going to be some type of performance boost. It's probably going to be fairly large. Well, here's the thing. Back when Microsoft first unveiled DirectX 12, the fact it was actually coming at GDC, when there was those initial posters that were flying around the internet and everyone saw the logo, that's when these arguments started. And there are several things that I think are key here for us all to remember. Firstly, let's tackle the PR side of things, because there is definitely some of the PR in here, and I feel that the argument, by the way, is actually somewhere in the middle. The Xbox One's fairly new. It is. It's been out, just under 6 months? So by the time Microsoft does release DX12, the console's going to be about 2 years old. But here's the thing. PC gamers are of the mindset that they know something new in terms of a GPU or a CPU or whatever is going to come out 18 months from now, 2 years from now, and it's going to drastically be better what they've currently got. They're used to it, they understand that. Console gamers aren't really the same. They are used to their product being the latest and the greatest, and so there would definitely be a little bit of a crap storm that went down if the console was only DX11 and PC was like DX12. Now, of course, the Xbox 360 was DX9, and Microsoft did release DX10 and DX11, but I don't think it would be good for Microsoft to unveil just a couple of months after the Xbox One's release that it's only capable of DX11 and then DX12 comes out on the PC. That would piss people off, particularly because they're talking about these low-level optimizations. So there is definitely some spin in there. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't going to be benefits, by the way, so hear me out. It's also worth noting that, as I've mentioned a couple of times, you could kind of read between the lines. Mantle is gaining ground. It's not to say that it's perfect. It, you know, as I mentioned, it does have some issues because it's only a single vendor it covers. And as I've also mentioned, OpenGL is most likely to embrace low level as well. It just stands to reason, particularly at this point. Mantle's having success, DX11 and 12, and people want it. You know, games developers want low level access. And it has to be for Linux anyway because they've got no alternative. Unless, of course, you know, you're going to be seeing Mantle on Linux. And so, with Valve pushing Linux, OpenGL, if it was to go low level, and if we were to see the situation where Microsoft didn't offer it, it's going to be pretty bad for Microsoft, particularly as they're already getting hammered. Tim Sweeney's just gone on record. This is another... I'm doing this video today as well, but Tim Sweeney's gone on and said, look, I don't like the Windows marketplace either, that, you know, this built-in Metro marketplace, it's just not good for the industry. It kind of goes against what PC gaming is all about, the open nature. And, you know, if they don't do something about this, if they don't embrace the open nature, which they seem to be with DirectX 12, he's basically said, you know, it's going to pave the way for Linux and Android and other OSs to really start to push forward on the PC. So, in addition to that, one has to remember that having a simpler, easier time to port to the PC from the Xbox One, or vice versa, might I add, is also going to benefit Microsoft hugely. It means that we're going to be getting better ports on the Xbox One, we're also going to be getting better ports on the PC, and we're going to be seeing more indie games on the Xbox One. It's going to encourage the support. However, once again, I'd like to reiterate, Microsoft does need to be kinder to indie developers. They are getting better, but there are still some horror stories that are popping up. However, to be fair, we're not really hearing from Microsoft, we're only hearing from the indie developers on that. And obviously, you know, if you've got a grudge, you're only going to talk negatively, so it's a bit... I don't like to judge too much on that. There's also another thing for us to remember. The Xbox One is a lot closer to the PC hardware than the Xbox 360. I'm talking about the, you know, the standard traditional desktop. It's got an x86/64 multi-core CPU, the Jaguar. It's got an AMD Radeon GCN based GPU, which is basically very similar to the 7000 series, and this is all based on an AMD SoC. And presumably, and this is according to Microsoft themselves, it uses a form of DirectX 11.x. Now, X is used because we don't know the version number of DirectX. We know that it does feature stuff such as tiled resources, however there are some arguments on whether it's 11.1 or 11.2. So I'm not going to make a judgment on that. But there are definitely some differences. Microsoft have removed some of the features that aren't Xbox One, in other words, that aren't required for a console, and they've also, of course, built in things which are required to use some of the custom hardware, for example, the Move engines and ESRAM and other libraries and stuff like that. Additionally, one would assume that there is indeed low-level access on the Xbox One's API, or the Xbox One's DX12, DX11. They have mentioned it's fairly low-level access anyway, and they have got it better than what it was. One also has to remember that DX12 is not just low-level access. They are also adding things such as command buffers and lists, or improving or adding pipeline state objects. They're doing the script heaps and other bits and pieces. Obviously, if you want to check more of that out, you can check out my initial analysis. You just search DirectX 12 on the channel and it'll pop right up. And it's likely that we're going to be seeing improvements. So what is my thoughts? Well, here's the thing. The PC doesn't have any optimization at all really at the moment. I mean, there is obviously a certain amount, but it's nowhere near as much as, you know, low-level access on a console. So Microsoft have stated that with multi-threading you could get like an increase up to 50% extra performance. Logically, and from what I'm reading and seeing at this point in time, I don't see that happening with the Xbox One. I just don't see it, because logically we've already got some level of low-level access. There's no way to me you're going to go from, okay, a system that's got some low-level access already to basically a 50% increase in performance, which mirrors a PC which has basically no low-level access to DirectX. I mean, DirectX 11, the way it handles threads, it's not that good. Let's just say that. It basically puts a lot of the rendering and so on one CPU, which is really bad. And so you've got one CPU core which is handling this thread, which has a hell of a lot of latency. It's not spreading the love over multiple threads, and that's not really how consoles generally work, because obviously they generally have typically something like one orchestrator thread, which will then basically spread the load over multiple cores. So anyway, that's not to say that I don't feel there's going to be any improvement. I feel that there is definitely going to be some. I'm not going to give you guys a percentage, because it's unfair for me to judge and give percentages based on an unreleased API that they've not even released all the features on. But I certainly don't feel that we're going to be seeing 50% increase in multi-threading. However, there's likely is going to be some further additions to the GPU. Now, it's also worth noting that there is definitely some crossover regarding Mantle, and, you know, AMD have gone on record, and this is not a verbatim quote, but they've certainly said pretty much, you know what, the Xbox One and the PS4 could use Mantle if it so desired. But it's not going to happen. You know, Microsoft are not going to use Mantle, because if they were to offer Mantle for the Xbox One, it would just hurt them long term for the PC. It would basically mean that obviously less people would use that API. You know, it would actually encourage games developers to say, screw it, let's just learn Mantle, and then, you know, for low-level access. So I don't think that's going to happen. They've got the solution available, and, you know, Microsoft could implement it via an update, but I don't really feel that that's going to happen at any time soon. Anyway, that's just about it for this part. It's getting fairly lengthy, and I don't really want to make this like a super lengthy video, so you guys can check out the article if you want a few sources and links and images and, you know, all the other good bits and pieces you'd expect. Next day or two, we'll be finishing this off. Now, ironically enough, this article and so forth was supposed to be considerably longer today. In fact, it was all supposed to be finished today. But here's what happened. I actually mentioned this on Facebook on RGT, but here's basically what happened. I got in from work, and I was going to go to the gym like an hour after I got in. So I was basically settling down. I was like, you know what, I'm going to have my coffee, get everything ready, finish writing this article, which I was like, just finished now, but, you know, this is back then. I was like, yeah, I'm going to finish the article. Literally just sat down with a small snack and a coffee, just clicking on the internet, and the whole thing went out, and I was like, what in the hell is going on? And believe it or not, the cable company that I'm with, they'd actually cut my internet. And I don't mean like, yeah, they, you know, shut down my account by accident. I mean physically they'd cut the cable outside my house. What happened was they were basically installing it with neighbours that are moving in. I've mentioned a couple of times that I have got neighbours that are moving in, hence sometimes you can hear a little bit of banging in some of my videos, which is extremely irritating, might I add. And yeah, basically, turns out they snipped the wrong cable. So I was basically without internet for like a couple of hours, so I just was like, you know what, screw this, I'm just going to go out. So I went out, took like a couple of hours to get back home, and finally my internet came back, and I've had a few issues with it, so I'm trying to resolve that as well. So I can only apologize for not getting all of this up today. It's just one of those things. Anyway, yeah, it turns out you need a cable not cut to actually have internet access, so I don't think that yeah, anyway, I'm gonna let you guys go because I still need to do lots of editing, and it's already ludicrously late at night. But hopefully you've enjoyed the video anyway, and I'll see you soon. This is not an April Fool's, by the way, just to clarify. So anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.